My job for today is to explain to you what elasticity is all about. And we all know, for one, that elasticity is an important concept in economics, wherein it explains to us how consumers like us would respond to the different price changes in our economy, and how would this be affecting the way people behave. And elasticity in economics is normally defined as the responsiveness of or sensitivity of one variable to another, wherein mathematically, elasticity is normally depicted as percentage change in one variable over the percentage change in another variable. In this case, we normally look into quantity demanded and price. Consumer responses, or what is known as elasticity, would normally be described in three ways. Normally, it can be described as elastic, inelastic, or unitary elastic. Let me deal with each one by one. Normally, when we talk of elastic, it has something to do with the sensitivity of the response to the certain change. So let's say if the price of a certain commodity would increase, definitely the demand of a certain product would either increase or decrease. So let's say we talk about pork. If the price of pork would increase, definitely people would lessen their demand for pork and would definitely find something that would enable them to have a substitute for pork, since the price of pork is quite high. Therefore, here you could be able to see that there is a certain show of how the changes would affect the consumers themselves. That is elastic. Inelastic, however, would show us that even if there is a price change, or even if there is a factor that would affect the quantity demanded, the response or reaction is normally insignificant. You don't notice the reaction at all. Example, let's say there is a significant change in the price of electricity. Whether we like it or not, people would still pay for electricity because we need electricity to be able to continue our daily lives. Here you would be able to see that the reactions are not really noticeable, because whether we like it or not, we still buy or pay for that specific good or service because we need them. That is inelastic. Unitary elastic, however, is having a reaction that's neither elastic or inelastic, meaning in between. In economics, there are three types of demand elasticity. Normally, it is described as own price elasticity, income elasticity, and cross price elasticity. Here, you'd be able to see the different factors that would affect the way people would respond to certain change in prices. So, let me deal with each type one by one. Here, I'd be able to discuss to you the different ways of describing elasticity, not only in terms of interpretation, but in terms of mathematic computation as well. Let us look into own price elasticity. What is own price elasticity? It looks into the responsiveness of the quantity demanded vis-a-vis the change of the price of a certain commodity, good or service for that matter. It boils down to answering the question, to what extent are the consumers going to react if there is a price change? Mathematically, we compute own price elasticity as percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price, wherein change in quantity can be computed as Q2 minus Q1, or new price minus old price. And quantity change in price can be computed as P2 minus P1, wherein P2 is the new price and P1 is the old price. Going deeper, percentage Q is presented by Q2 minus Q1 divided by bar Q, wherein bar Q is the average of the two quantity demanded values. And percentage P is presented by P2 minus P1 over bar P, wherein bar P is the average of the two given prices. Therefore, the entire formula for own price elasticity can be computed as Q2 minus Q1 over bar Q divided by P2 minus P1 over bar P. Or, in summary, it can be computed as divided by this is the formula that we use in getting the value of own price elasticity. After getting the value, what does that mean? How do we interpret the results? In this case, we have to be able to get the absolute value. We don't consider the signs of the number because in own price elasticity, we expect that the reaction of people would be represented by a real price value. Okay. Let's look into the interpretation of the prices. If the value is elastic or then the response of your quantity demanded in every percentage change in price is more than 1. Meaning, for every percentage, 1% change in P, QD would definitely decrease by more than 1%. Example, if the price of soft drinks would increase by 1%, consumers would definitely decrease their demand for soft drinks or would look instead for an alternative for soft drinks like fruit juices or mineral water perhaps. Therefore, it only shows that consumption can be altered when the product has many substitutes, particularly if the goods are not luxury goods or they're not basic goods. So normally, a graph of an elastic good would normally look this way. At this point, the consumers are not ready to accept any price change because any price change would definitely result to a certain reaction. What about if it's inelastic? If the price value is inelastic, the response of your quantity demanded in every percentage change in price is less than 1. Meaning, for every 1% change in P, your demand would decrease by less than 1%. Let me give you an example. Let's say rice. If the price of rice would increase by 5%, the consumers will not decrease their demand for it because more than 5% or more of it is not going to affect them because rice for people like us is a necessity. We all know for a fact that in the Philippines, rice is a staple food. So whether we like it or not, it is important, it is imperative that we have rice in our daily meals. So despite the fact that the price change would be significant, specifically for rice, people still buy rice because we are accustomed to eat rice every day. Consumers have no capacity to decrease more his demand, even if the price increases, because the product is a necessity. So when a product is a necessity and there's no substitute for a certain product, the consumers are compelled to buy that specific product. Normally, the graph would look this way. At this point, the consumers are not ready to lower their consumption, even if there's a significant price change. So, even if the product would definitely affect their demand and would definitely affect their budget, still people would tend to buy that specific product because it is an imperative for them to have the purchase of that specific product. What about if it's unitary elastic? The response of your quantity demanded in every percentage change in price is equal to 1. Therefore, it only shows here that every 1% change in price, your QD would decrease by 1%. Does this happen? Ideally, you yes, ideally it happens, but then this happens on the extreme. It it is a utopian way of representing specifically changes in prices over quantity demanded, but then on the usual side, on the usual day-to-day basis, it is not a normal scenario. Normally, the graph would normally be represented this way. At this point, consumers may have the option not to buy the product if there is a price change because they can always forgo the product and find something that can either be an alternative to the product or can change the product. Let's say if in America, if the price of rice would change, definitely they can forgo rice and get the substitutes. So normally they will not anymore buy rice. Instead, they would opt to buying potatoes or bread as a way of um, consuming or be their staple food for calories and forgo of rice, particularly if they cannot afford the price of rice. So that's own price elasticity. Now we look into income elasticity. Income elasticity looks into the responsiveness of your quantity demanded, particularly also considering the consumer's income. This tends to answer the question, what or how would consumers react if there is a specific change in their income? So normally, the formula for solving this value would be represented by this. So if a while ago we were looking into price, this time around we will substitute price to income. We will just have to change the value of P to the value of Y. So if we take a look at it, Q2 minus Q1 divided by the average of the two values over your new income plus minus your old income divided by the average of the two incomes. So that's how you solve it. Given the values that you get, how do you think would be able to interpret the values? So in income elasticity, if your result would be negative, the value or the good would be an inferior good. If the answer is positive, then the good is considered a normal good. But if the answer is greater than 1, the answer is normally considered a necessity, or the good is considered a necessity. If it's greater than or equal to 1, then it's a luxury good. Let's explain each of them. What do you mean when you say inferior good or service? When we talk of an inferior good or service, it normally looks into, or it's normally described as the good or the service that you consume because it is the only thing you can afford at a specific period. If your income could have been higher, you could have had another choice given the capacity or the consuming power that you'd be able to have. But a good is considered a normal good when it follows the normal or average behavior of a consumer. The more money you have, the more demand for that specific product you would be. Comparing normal and inferior good, let's say if I only have 20 pesos in my pocket, I will not be able to afford to buy Haagen-Dazs ice cream because I only have 20 pesos. Therefore, in that case, Haagen-Dazs is a superior good because I cannot afford it. And if I can afford Cornetto, for that matter, because it's only within within the bounds of 20 pesos, Cornetto is considered Cornetto is considered an inferior good because that's the only good I can afford given the money I have at that specific moment. But given I have a hundred pesos, I can afford to buy, let's say, Magnum ice cream. Because if you take a look at it in the market, Magnum can be priced as 50 pesos. And given 100 pesos, I can afford and I can be given a lot of options given the income or the money that I have at a specific moment. So, since Magnum is within my consuming power, then we can consider Magnum a normal good. Last but definitely not the least is what we call the cross price elasticity. Cross price elasticity looks into the responsiveness of your quantity demanded to the change in the price of another good. What does it intend to answer? It intends to look into the price or the reaction of the consumer given the price of another good. So, how do we compute for cross price elasticity? If we look into the computation, this is computed as percentage change in the quantity demanded of product A divided by the percentage change in price of product B, resulting to this very long formula. Quantity demanded of product A minus the former quantity demanded of product A divided by the average of quantity demanded of the product A divided by the new price of product B minus the old price of product B divided by the average of those two prices, specifically of product B. Given this formula, what would we arrive at? How do we interpret the answers? But let's take a look at first as how do we be able to compute it in long method. Given these results, how do we interpret? So when the results are a positive value, normally the good is considered a substitute good. And when the result is a negative, then the goods are normally complementary goods. But if the results would end up zero, products A and B are not at all related. So today, I was able to discuss to you elasticity, demand elasticity, and how these can be interpreted mathematically, and how would this be able to explain the different reactions of consumers as price changes. Thank you and enjoy watching.